Hi there, and welcome back to the Count to 10 podcast. My name is Simon Sanborn. Don't think I said that last time. I'm a behavior teacher, and I started doing this podcast just because I wanted to share some information that I've gathered over the years or things that I actually learn day to day that I think might be helpful to parents, teachers, kids, anybody who's kind of struggling with different behaviors and different things. And I think people who have listened to this podcast know that when I talk about behaviors, people think very specific things, like maybe a behavior kid or a behavior student. But behaviors are things that happen all the time. And they are what signal to us as we are, being human beings, and the way we communicate behaviors, communicate things. And so it's very important to know that behaviors are everywhere. It's not just one thing. You definitely focus on behaviors that cause struggle with, being at home or at school and things like that. Those are more specific. But they all kind of come back to how are we communicating with each other, and do we know how to communicate with each other? So that's kind of what this podcast is about. I was going to talk today about a woman. Her name is Dr. Perry Jensen. I have some notes actually I wrote down, so excuse the glare on my glasses. She is a counselor and a therapist, and works with people with ADHD. And I like listening to her because I have ADHD, and I've found a lot of ways to cope and deal with it, including medication and a lot of other skills. But what I liked about her, listening to her, was that she talked about putting things into practice. So she liked the idea of people going to therapy, people getting help, people getting tools, understanding themselves better, understanding their place in the world better, that kind of thing. She had a difficult time when people have these moments of like revelation, like an aha moment, but then they don't do anything with it. So what are you putting into practice? So if your therapist is saying to you, hey, meditation and mindfulness is going to be really, really important for you, you need to start doing that. That's not follow through. So tell me what you're doing. What are you getting from it? Like really following up with, here are the tools, here are the aha moments that we get, these revelations. Are we going to let them change our lives for the better? Are we going to do the things that are supposed to be good? I've kind of been thinking about that a lot lately for myself. Once I start understanding that something is important, or I need to change something, or something could be inhibiting me somehow, something could be bothering me health-wise, what am I doing or not doing to figure out how to change those things? And if I'm going to become conscious of them, I need to start doing something. Otherwise, I'm kind of almost like lying to myself. So I've done little things like cut back on alcohol, cut back on certain foods, trying to get to the gym. Little things like that where I can say, okay, now that I've learned this, how can I apply it to do something for me? It's wonderful to hear things and absorb them, but then to not use them, I was just like, that's kind of crazy. Well, how come I hadn't thought about that before? So I really like that part. And she talks a lot about how we don't teach a lot of emotional intelligence to kids. Even our own children at home, we don't teach a lot of emotional intelligence. I don't even know if why is the question that we should be asking. I just can't believe that I raised all my kids, and I feel like I'm still raising them, but I feel like I'm just now beginning to understand myself enough to see where my pitfalls were, of what I could have done differently, and wanting to be better, like right now, because of what I can look back and kind of recognize. So teaching that, of what I could have done for them as a parent to kind of help them understand their behaviors, the feelings that were behind them, and the thinking that's involved. At this point, they're old enough that I can give them suggestions and ideas, but I can't really like hold them to it, like read this book or, do this one thing. They're kind of on their own path, but I can still try to give them information. But man, if I could go back and redo it all, I would probably focus on getting my kids, having them become the best emotionally intelligent people they could possibly be. I always wanted my kids to be happy and healthy. Man, I don't know how you can be happy and healthy, right, without having some of that emotional intelligence. So I thought that was really, really awesome. And we can do it in lots of different ways. So I'll talk about student stuff here in a second. But she talked a lot about emotions and feelings being not good and not bad. So it goes back to what I talked about a little bit ago about messages. Behaviors are messages, right? Feelings are messages. What are we doing with these messages? So if I am feeling anxious about something, Where's that anxiousness coming from? Instead of me sitting in it and wallowing in it and it just getting worse and me feeling like I have no direction, no way of fixing it, I've got to be able to be like, oh, wow, I feel sick to my stomach. Something's up. What am I thinking about? Oh, that's right, I have a presentation tomorrow. That's what I was thinking about. All right, let's get ourselves together. Let's take some deep breaths or count to 10 or something to get ourselves back in the moment. Then you go back to your day. But it's like, what a no-brainer, right? So that and emotional intelligence, understanding how we feel, I just think is just so astronomically important that it should be kind of right up there with math and language arts and reading. Because think about how many adults that we know that struggle with these very things, right? Functional, awesome adults who struggle with this stuff. And my therapist says it all the time. I was just joking with one of my associates yesterday. My therapist will say to me, why do you think you should know that or how to do that, thing? And I was like, well, I'm an adult. I'm 50 years old. I've been around the world enough, She goes, if you haven't been taught it, how do you think you're supposed to just know it? And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fair enough. Sounds kind of silly. But I just appreciate that very directness about it and being like, okay, so some people feel that like therapy is just like finding ways to give excuses for yourself, blame on your parents, that kind of thing. And it's not. It's about self-discovery. So I really enjoy that part of it. Yeah, it's interesting the things that we kind of hold ourselves accountable for that really isn't even, how would we really know that to begin with? So she's a big fan of Dr. Siegel's. I've talked about him with the Understanding the Child, Brain of a Child books, and all the workbooks that I have, and the teenage books, the Brainstorm book by Daniel Siegel. All those books are just really centered around understanding emotions and having those connections, right? And I highly recommend, if you haven't got some of his books and you're a new parent, right from the beginning, it just gives you such an understanding of how your child's brain's working in so many stages. It just is like a handbook for kids. And that emotional intelligence is the core of it, which is why I probably like it so much. So, let me get back to what I was talking about. Again, when we just talk about emotions and making them connected, and they're not good and they're not bad. It goes back to Daniel Siegel. We start labeling these emotions, and then we start, some are good to deal with, some aren't good to deal with. Think about happiness. So do we ever really recognize when we are happy? I don't know if we're able to recognize it and be part of it and sit in it when we haven't recognized the fact of how we get when we're sad, where we're down, right? You have to be able to recognize both. We have to have that up and down kind of thing I talked about last week of the roller coaster that we're kind of emotionally supposed to go throughout the day. We're not supposed to be stagnant in one emotion. That's not how it works. But she does talk a lot about not shutting those emotions down. So when you start labeling them good and bad, they start having connotations that we struggle with. That's a good behavior, so I don't have to worry about that. I'll worry about the bad behaviors. You have to worry about all of them. They're all important. They're all part of the same mix. It goes back to lots of people have talked about you can't shut down one emotion. That's one of the first things I really remember sticking with me with my therapist was her saying, so you feel like you're saving your family the volume or the outrageousness of your anger if you were to express it. And I said, yeah, I saw how anger was expressed as a child, and it wasn't very good, and it scared the hell out of me. So I don't want to be like that. So I'm going to shut it down. That's safe. That's safer for me. I don't want to feel that way. I also don't want to be like that. So she said, you can't do it without, you can't shut down anger and not shut down everything else. And I was like, whoa. She's like, so you can't not be angry, and that's of course true, but you have to be able to be in it and express it and understand what's happening, and express it the right way. And that's how you handle your anger. But again, I wasn't taught it. So she's like, you don't know how to express your anger correctly, and it was hard for me to be like, okay, I'm 50 years old and I don't know how to express my anger correctly. But I started realizing that it really was suppressing my feelings all across the board. And I was having a lot more high highs and low lows instead of kind of being in the middle more. So it was good to recognize that. And again, not to give yourself a cop out because you don't know how to do something, but once you become aware, you better be on top of it, right? There's no reason not to change to make some of those things better. But I like her not saying that feelings or emotions are good or bad. They're all important. And I think, again, when we stop labeling them as being good or bad, it helps us deal with them so much easier, or be willing to deal with them quite a bit. So, and she's big about not I think it's called pathological pathologizing. She's really big on not pathologizing something or shaming it or diagnosing it from someplace or wrong or bad. It's just more about the experience that you had. So don't blame it. Don't give it a hard time. Just it is what it is. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. So I thought that was awesome. I just like the idea of behaviors or emotions or thoughts not being good or bad. They just are what they are. They're just behaviors. They're just messages, right? The feelings and emotions are more information for us to figure things out. Like they're all just tools to understand ourselves better and understand those around us better. So I'll get to the kind of teacher part then. So what I think is important about being this emotional intelligence kind of teacher would be a big deal. So the idea that I had would be, if you are having a student who isn't able to make those connections, the easiest thing to do. So let's say a kid stands up and swears in class or says this is effing stupid, during math. If the moment is correct and you have an opportunity to speak to them, saying, instead of, we don't talk like that in my classroom, or, the school, that's one of the school rules that you broke, or those kind of things. I think it's just as important, and I know I kind of talked about that last week about following the rules and making connections to others, but again, that's emotional connections to others. I'm interrupting other people's learning, and that bothers me because I care about other people. So this is different in the sense of helping them figure out why they were feeling the way they were feeling. Wow, when you stood up and said that today, it kind of surprised me. How are you feeling? I mean, it could be that simple, Were you upset about the math? Was something bothering you before class? What caused you to stand up and say that? I'm just checking in on you to see if everything's okay. I think that there still might be consequences. Don't get me wrong. I still think, though, that there can be that emotional intelligence piece in there as well. And I think that you might even find yourself having to deal with less behaviors due to the consequence if they were more connected with that emotional intelligence. So if you can get them to understand what they were feeling, what was going on before that happened, they're going to be better off. Hopefully you'll have less behaviors. And you just help the kid understand themselves better. You know what I mean? So instead of them standing up and doing that in some class in high school, however many years from now, you just taught them something invaluable. So as I wrap up today, I would highly suggest listening to this podcast. I don't think I put a link in there, but it is called ADHD for Smart Ass Women. And it's a podcast my wife loves, and I've gotten a lot from it. And I think it's really cool that somebody is kind of trying to wrap their heads around some of this stuff. And I like that they're talking about emotions. They're talking about, how we shut things down, and, especially if you have, kids with ADHD. Emotional connections are even tougher, because they're missing pieces and their brains aren't, firing correctly. So it's important to kind of figure out what tools can we give them to connect with those emotions, and then they don't feel so bad having to struggle. You know what I mean? Instead of feeling like you're stupid, you're like, well, okay, I got something going on and I got to work a little bit harder. We'll get through this. You know what I'm saying? So it's some of those pieces that I think that emotional intelligence can really, really, really benefit kids of all ages. Take an average kid and you talk to them about something like that. Average being a very relative term, sorry. But, who knows what that kid's life is like? Who knows what they say to their mom or dad or a sibling about connecting to their emotions. So you'd be shocked at how much growth can happen with somebody when you just give them an opportunity to share something like that. And our society desperately needs it, just desperately needs it. So thank you so much for your time and your attention. It means a lot to me. And I hope to keep doing this so that people can just have a little bit of information here and there to make life a little bit easier. So thanks for your time, and take care of yourselves.